All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Ceramic Core Devs call. And as usual, I don't think we have like any special interruptions, so we'll just go on as usual with the roundtable. So I think I'll give it over to Janko to start off.
Yep. There are a lot of interesting things going on. One of them is that the IPFS team has merged RPR for passing custom codecs, in particular DAC codec that we needed to pass. So we switched. We are not using the forked version of IPFS anymore. We are using the latest one. With the latest one, they introduced the concept of types, and we use that to get rid of our just types for some of the IPFS types. They're still working on some IPFS core functionalities, so I assume that we will update once again soon. But now it's definitely more clear.
Well, on the IPFS thing, like one thing I was confused about is that I thought like IPFS core, like the package, was supposed to be like much smaller, but when I'm looking at that in like Bundlephobia, it's like same size as the IPFS package. I don't know if like something's wrong with Bundlephobia or they missed something.
Yeah, you mentioned that. That was super interesting. I haven't compared them, but the thing is, when I look at a IPFS, I can see just the dependency, I believe, to the IPFS core and the CLI. So it should be more or less the same. But yeah, it's definitely more decoupled. IPFS is definitely more decoupled than before. So that's pretty good news. Besides that, we are working on stability on the ceramic anchoring service, and just the communication between ceramic, IPFS Daemon, and the anchoring service. So I assume by the end of the day or tomorrow, the first version of the playground will be available, because we had some minor issues, but after one PR, that should be resolved. So I believe that's gonna it from my end. I don't know. There are more interesting things, but Val, would like to.
One question first, I guess. So with the playground, it should be fairly simple to add kind of the ceramic stats, right?
Yeah. Definitely. So far, I added just IPFS Daemon that is now open sourced. Just it's a simple. Just we wrap the IPFS, added DAC Jose, and just you can put the S3 bucket to use it as a repo if you want. So that's one thing. Just IPFS Daemon. Then there's a CAS, or the ceramic anchoring service, Ganache, the latest one, for running local Ethereum, and there's just ceramic running in Daemon mode. So if you want to put stats, that'll be, we just need the Docker file. I believe that's it.
It is perfect. Let's maybe try to coordinate that in the upcoming sprint, I guess.
Yep. Cool.
Cool.
Val?
All right. So I think, Val, do you have any updates?
Yeah, no, not really. Not really at this point.
Okay. So I think one thing that I wanted to go through this meeting is just the advanced queries, or multi-queries, as the CIP is called. And we can maybe do some like live feedback on that. So let me just make sure I can have them right up here. Cool. So yeah, this is basically like a specification for how to query multiple documents at the same time. And it changes a few things, or basically it adds a new method. There's three things it changes. So one is it adds a new method to the Ceramic API. And then it adds a new endpoint to the HTTP daemon. And then finally, it updates the pub/sub messages. So we can just start from the top. It kind of goes very simple to kind of more advanced stuff later down. So the change to Ceramic API is very straightforward. We have a new function called load documents. It takes a document ID, and it takes an array of strings, which is paths. So that might be like, so in this example here, we have like document A that links to document B on the cool link property. So basically what that means is that document A contains a property cool link, which the value of that property is like ceramic : / and then the document ID of document B. And now, so now I can do ceramic.load documents and document ID of doc A, and then a path that's cool link. And this would return an object which has a document ID and maps to the content of the document. Or actually, I think this should be a document instance here, so that should probably be updated. And this, so I think there might need to be either the document ID or the document ID as a string. But yeah, so that's the basic idea. You get like a map from doc IDs to the document instances. So then you like, if you load, for example, IDX, the IDX document / basic profile, or I mean, this basic profile definition, then you would like get both the IDX document and the basic profile document, and you would like look in the basic or in the IDX document and find the document ID. Or I guess, yeah, I guess this is something that would happen in, like internally in the IDX library, that it would like find the appropriate document and it would need to like load that again. Yep. So any questions on this part?
Just one minor. Should we pass document options like we are passing to many of the methods in the Ceramic API? So we have a couple of flags there that could be useful maybe in the future. So that can be optional, of course.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Let's add that.
Cool.
Yeah, I think I just didn't think about that. Anything else that's unclear or wrong with this? Anyone can see?
I'm wondering if we need to load all the documents when we want to get the content at a specific path. Like here, if we want to follow the cool link document, do we even need to return doc A in the response?
So generally you would want to like confirm that doc B is actually the document you're looking for. And to do that, you would have to like look in doc A and see that that's actually the document ID that's being linked.
Okay.
That's something that in theory could happen inside of Ceramic, and like, so that's verified, and you would just return the document that you were looking for. Yeah, I guess there could be like a different API in the future that just like loads a specific document given a path.
Yeah,
but then it's like unclear what happens if you have like a partial path that doesn't end up in a document, but it ends up in some content.
Yeah, I guess if you want, well, in that way, it should be an error. Like if you do load document here in /cooling, but cooling doesn't actually refer to a document. That's not valid, right? That's not a valid query.
Right. Yeah, I think we could iterate on like adding more different types of methods that use this kind of underlying functionality in the future. But I think this is a good start.
So paths is an array of strings. So basically, if I put in like coolink1, for example, is that going to resolve to a document that's linked to doc A? Or is there a way for me to like link multiple documents? Or is it just two, basically?
No, you can have like any number of documents, right? So you might have like document A that links to document B, and document B like links to document C, and you would like follow a path through them.
Gotcha. Okay. So there's one route that I'm starting at, but I can like go down any path on that one route.
Exactly.
Okay.
So basically you're searching by the key and you're hopping based on the value. Like the paths are the keys through the documents, and where the next document you go to would be the value that's stored at that key, right?
Well, I mean, you could have a content in a document that's like, here are like cool links, and then there's like A, B, C. So you do like cool links /A, and then you find like a specific document. So you might follow like not just one key in the content. You might like go through multiple like folders or like multiple kind of foldings in the object. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And that can happen easily. Like that seems like if you have different, you might have different paths that look differently. Like you might have like this key / the first object, the first like item in that object as the path. So you have like two sections within, like two sections of the path describe that where you're going within one single document, where in other cases, if it's just the key value mapping, you would just have one section of the path for that document. So does it matter? Is it smart enough to know, like, maybe I have like triple nested objects, so like 3 sections of the path are just for finding the value in this one document?
Yeah, I mean, that shouldn't be a problem. Cool. All right, then I'll move down to the multi-query on the HTTP daemon. So basically this introduces a new method on the ceramic HTTP API that's just like called states. And the idea for this is, well, it basically solves 2 problems. One is currently we have to like query each individual document. So if you kind of load 10 documents and then you want to like know updates for all, if there's been any updates to any of those 10 documents, and the HTTP client needs to like make a request for each individual document. So this new API allows us to query multiple kind of documents at the same time, but it also allows to include paths for any particular document that we're querying. So here we have an interface for multi-query, and that's just basically a doc ID and paths. And yeah, as Janko said before, there might be like an additional options property here. And yeah, this is basically exactly the same interface as here. But then we have like a wrapping interface that's just like an array of these multi-query objects. So you might query multiple documents at once. And the reason we want that, I guess I explained that just before. And then the response from this API is basically has this response data, and it's basically a doc ID string, and it maps to the doc state object or type. And then, yeah, we have used the general response, which is just like status and data. Yeah, so
Do we need the message there as well? If the status is failed, so it will be, the message will be encoded in the data, right? The reason.
Yeah, I kind of just quickly wrote out the interface for the happy path, and I assume that we will use like add. If status is like failed, we would like add the other things we need here. So this is just kind of used to describe general flow. Cool. Any other questions here? So I guess right now we would just use this query options for the HTTP client for load documents. In the future, though, we could refactor the HTTP client to like use this method or endpoint every time it's like loading a doc or like checking if there's update to a document. So that would like make the HTTP client much more efficient. Yeah. Any other thoughts on this? Cool. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, and now we get to the kind of interesting part. So this is basically an update to the pub/sub query system, and really it's an update to the message system in general in the kind of core of Ceramic. And here we have 3 different methods or messages: update, query, and response. And I don't know why it's just because there's a tab and the other space is great. Yeah, so this kind of maps to the current one. So if we go to here, okay, that's not right. Let's go back. Where was I? So this is, oh shit. Oh. Let's see. Queries. Yeah, so right now we have these message types. And I think in practice, we're only implementing update and request. And the response is actually now use the update, which is weird. And we wanted to fix that. However, now with this new CIP, it kind of changes that a little bit. So now we have this update method, and the update method basically merges the update and the anchor meta. So the document, it's a document ID. The tip is the CID of the latest tip. And the anchor service is optional. And if you have kind of anchored or requested an anchor for this tip, then you would include this and basically say which anchor service that you used to make the request, so that anyone who's listening to this document could get this metadata information and like just check that when this anchor is scheduled for. Yeah, so that's the update.
How would you distinguish if you wanted to go and check for when this update got anchored? There's no request ID in the update message. So how would you distinguish previous anchors of the same doc? Oh, it's based on the tip CID. That's how. Never mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, one question here. Since the anchor service is just the URL of the anchor service that was used, so should we add more information there, or just create a schema that kind of like describes the type of the message and the contents of the message here from the anchor service? Because according to by the URL and the updates. Maybe I'm not sure if I want to listen, if I want if I want to check this document at all, because maybe the anchor service has changed and it's not Ethereum based, it's something else. Should I query the anchor service to find out about that metadata, that information? Or should we embed that into the update?
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess what we would want to do, like at first, is in the document we would actually specify which chain it's being anchored on. I think Spencer will be working on that soon. So we would know that this anchor service is on a particular chain. But yeah, there might be a reason to add more metadata here in the future. But I think this is like a good first step.
Yeah, I'm just imagining, for example, someone's gonna create like a just fast anchor service, right? I just wanna notify everybody that it's using, it's anchoring on every 5 minutes or something, and devs can choose, what anchoring service to use. So if we embed it here, that'll be cool.
Yeah, that seems like a good next upgrade. Cool. And then, so the query. So there's a few things that are changing with the query. So recap before, it's called request. And the only thing we sent, we had the type 1 and ID as a document ID. What we do now, we still have type 1. ID is just a random number that just like uniquely identifies the query. And then we have a new property called doc, which is just a string doc ID. And then we have a paths, which is optional, which includes an array of string paths. So, well, the reason we can't use the doc ID as the ID of the query anymore is because we might have multiple queries to the same document, and some might include the paths and some might not. So I actually considered making, so right now I said the ID is just like a random number. I considered making that like a hash of the contents, but I think that seems a little bit excessive. I think a random number should be fine. All right, and then the response to a query is basically same ID number, and then it's just like the string doc ID, which maps to a string. And of course, we might have multiple document IDs in this response. Yeah, so that's basically the gist of the new kind of message types in the PubSub system. So I guess the way this would be used is if, so let's say you load documents and you load doc ID A and then path cool link. So of course this query would get the same doc ID A and path cool link. And then the other node that sees that and like, oh, I actually have this document, and it sees like, oh, there's a request to this other doc or like this path. And if my node that is like trying to respond to this also has the other document, I will send both responses. But I don't think it makes sense if like my node only has document A and not the linked document. I think my node should only respond with like the first document. So what that means is basically like you can include the paths, and that might make the query kind of look up faster, but not necessarily. If these documents that you're trying to fetch are like spread out across a bunch of nodes for some reason, then that query will take longer because, or you basically have to make multiple queries. So that's the thing to consider. But I think in many cases, documents are actually going to live on the same node. So like if I back up my own IDX document and all my data, like my node is going to have all of the documents in my IDX document. So my node could always like reply with the query that you're responding to.
If the peer who responds only has the doc but not the linked ones from the paths, you said you have to then reissue the query for the linked docs, or you just have to wait longer? Like, will there still be work going on in the network to get you those paths? They just might take longer, but it'll still come.
No, you would basically need to like get the first document, and then you check, oh, here's like a doc ID link, and then you would like have to make a lookup for that document, right? So basically, you would need to like make one request, and then you only get like one of the documents, and then you see like when you go through the document, see like, oh, here's actually a document link or like a doc ID. Then and if you get the response with that doc ID, you obviously have that in your kind of local environment. But if you don't have that, you would have to make another request.
So what that means is that the peer who receives the request, if they have the main doc but not the links, they won't pass they'll respond, and they won't forward the query on to their peers. But
right.
But what if you send the request to multiple peers, and like one of them has just the one and the other one has all of them, and you get the response from just the one first, but then later, then a few seconds later, you get the response from another peer with everything. You'll still take it, right? You won't.
Yeah, I think that's right. Like you would just like start, like once you get the first response, you can start loading the first document or the first few documents, and then like if you get like another response that has like some other subset, then you could like start loading those as well, right?
I guess the real question is when like the load documents function returns. Like after that point, even if your process received new information, you'd have no way to surface it to the developer.
Well, yeah, I mean, you would return when you have explored all the paths, right?
So you'd have to wait till you got it either by manually reissuing the query or by getting it asynchronously.
Right. So in this function, for example, you'd like load documents and you like pass doc ID and the paths, and you would always want this to return with all of the documents that were referenced by these paths.
So if while you're processing the first response you got, you get another response with more information, then you'll consider it. But if by the time you finished processing your first response, you're still missing information, then you'll issue new queries for the information you're missing.
Right, exactly.
Okay, I think that makes sense.
And is all of that like automatic? Like the node will just do that, or does the developer have to do anything?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that the node should do that.
I was wondering where the random number is coming from. Like, how is that being generated?
Oh, I mean, I think that's just like when you create the query, you just generate a random number.
So your node then basically keeps track of that.
Right, yeah, because you would need to like, you would need to keep track of that. You just generate that to be able to like distinguish which messages are actually meant as a response to you.
Does it have to actually be random, or could it just be like incremented? Or do you want it to be like a random across, like, I don't know, if I spin my node down and then restart it or something?
Well, I think random is probably the easiest. If we have like some incrementation, like then how do we make sure the two nodes are not using the same number, right? I guess you could do something where you like base that off your peer ID or something like that. But yeah, I guess the random number seems simpler.
Does it have to be a number? Can I use the UID libraries and just create a UID string there?
Yeah, that works.
Cool.
Yeah, I had the same question. What happens if these do collide? If you wind up with different nodes creating the same random number, what's the risk?
The risk is that you get a response for another query, right? So and that might cause some issues. But I mean, I guess that wouldn't like break anything necessarily. You just get a response with like a bunch of documents that this is not meant for, like I don't know. It doesn't request any of this.
You'd be able to tell the response comes back with the path encoded as well, right? Not just the CIDs.
No, it's just the document IDs and the tips, right?
So you wouldn't be able to distinguish if you got a different set of documents than the one you requested. You would just assume that those were the ones you requested.
Well, you couldn't really, because like if the response doesn't include the document ID which your request kind of originated from, then you wouldn't know, or you would know, like if it doesn't include that, then you would know it's like not meant for you.
Right. So it's only a risk if the doc and ID collide. If you have the same ID for the same doc, but with different paths, then you could wind up assuming that the docs you got.
I mean, I guess it could be like we could have like a bad implementation. This is like assuming that the correct document ID is in there and like breaks. So that's like another risk.
But even if it does, or it does contain the same original doc ID, but then erroneous other doc IDs from the paths, you would assume that.
Yeah, I mean that would work, but yeah.
So that's the risk of that's the main risk of collision.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of why I considered like just having the ID being like the hash of type, doc, and paths. But it seems a little bit like excessive. I don't know if that's needed.
I think that would be super awesome. Yeah, that would be awesome because if there's some like popular documents or just not popular documents, but queries that are often gonna be on a network, and like the same queries, you will create the same query for like the token path.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
And besides optimization, like that correlation is awesome. So
yeah,
I'm totally for doing it.
No, that's a very good, that's a great point. So I'll update that.
And Joel, so basically you're making a request, and the first node that responds to you is the one that you take. Is that how it's working?
No, I mean, you would, if you get multiple responses, you would like compare them if they're different. It's like how the protocol works right now. If you get like multiple messages from multiple peers, you would like compare all of the responses and see which one is like the correct one if they're different.
Is there like, so instead of, the client sort of needing to make multiple requests if it gets like an incomplete response, should like, I don't know what the trade-offs would be or what it would look like if the node that has like the root of your query request but doesn't have the linked documents like goes and fetches those and then returns it to you.
I would say that that's like a bad idea, because then I could like make another node have like my documents, and then I could like add 1 million documents that links to, and then I would just like send a query to that. Yeah, oh, I want this thing, and then that you can like basically DOS nodes by making requests to documents it doesn't have.
How is that different from just making requests for a bunch of documents without this as like today?
No, what Senna was saying is if the response node would like see the first document and see that, oh, this links to something, but it doesn't have that locally, it would fetch that first before it responds. Then if you have a document, or if that node has a document and you're in control of that document, you could basically like make an update to that document that links to like a gazillion different documents. And then you make a request that says like, oh, I want this document and all the documents it links to. And then this node that you make that want to respond to the request would have to like load all of these documents from the network.
How is that different than just issuing a request for a whole lot of documents?
But because if that node doesn't have those documents, it would only respond with the document it has. So it wouldn't need to like fetch new documents.
You would have to go ask other nodes for the pieces that they have versus putting the burden on one node.
Yeah, it's basically like the node that you're interacting with and making the query from. Yeah, that node would have to like fetch all the documents, but the other nodes that just like maintain the state of a few documents, they don't want to like randomly just like load a bunch of documents just because some other node is requesting that.
Okay, but what if, yeah, so I mean, yeah, making it all go back through that one node as a serialization point, sure. But what about just forwarding the query on to the peer graph as if you didn't have the document in the middle, but just like let it continue to flow, and then whoever gets it sends the response directly back to the requester. Don't stop the message propagation once you get partial information. Let it continue to propagate until all the pieces are there.
Yeah, I see. So you basically would like make a new query for, so let's say we have this simple example up here, and node 1 has document A and node 2 has document B, and node 0 is my node. So I make a request, I send query doc IDA, equal link, and then the node 1 sees this and sends a response with like same ID as this query, and then the document ID of document A. But then it sees like, oh, there's actually a path and there's document B. And it would send a new request basically that just says document B as the document. And then
Yeah, but that
get
will
a
kind of
response. And then it would make another response to the original query.
But it would have to make the original requester the person you're supposed to send the response to, is like in the way you'd forward.
Yeah, like the origin. Yeah.
But I believe we will flood the network with this, right? Just imagine just a lot of nodes just get and see the paths, you know, and just create a bunch of other messages, you know, and send to the network.
How is it different than as if that node just didn't have the document and just forwarded the message on?
Yeah. So basically we would like make it like an upgrade query or something like that like is based on this ID, but like has a sub ID or something.
Something, yeah. You have to think about the exact structure of the message, but
yeah, that could be possible. It seems much more complex though. Yeah, it seems like something we should consider for like an upgrade, I think.
Yeah, it'd be fine to do that as a future improvement, but it does seem like, you know, we're sort of stopping doing work, like we're stopping message propagation when sort of unnecessarily, and we could just allow the system to keep working instead of having to stop and restart a new set of work. We could just let the original work just keep flowing until it's all completed.
Yeah,
it would be more efficient.
Cool.
I had one more thing. I'm trying to remember what it was now. Oh yeah, I had the question about metadata. So does this apply to like schemas?
Right. So I think this doesn't include that right now, but I think what would make sense is if the responder would like check if this document has a schema and automatically add the schema document to here, right? Because even if you don't provide any path, if you load a document that has a schema, you should probably include a schema in here. Because you always need to fetch the schema if you fetch the document.
Assuming that document has a schema.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's what I said. Like if the document has a schema, then you should probably include the document and the schema.
Okay, so that's one thing to consider. The second thing is, might you ever want to do like a query path like /* and just like get all the documents something links to?
Yeah, I kind of omitted that from here because it adds more kind of complexity. But yeah, you could potentially just do kind of regular expressions here for the paths. I don't know if anyone else has any input on that.
Because this like requires you to get, like with excluding that, you either have to like fetch the document, like read what's in it, and then like go fetch that one. But maybe you are building an interface or something where you just want to like load all of the things in a user's IDX, rather than needing to like make all of these individual ones. You could just like shortcut it.
Yeah. I don't know if like, I don't think there's like a huge amount of like more difficult to implement. I don't know. What do you think, Janko, Spencer?
Sorry, I was reading something in the spec, thinking about something else. What was it again? Sorry.
So basically, like right now we pass like an array of strings, but Michael suggests like, yeah, maybe we could like do a regular expression if we want to like do multiple things.
Like /* for all.
Yeah, but
Well, those aren't mutually exclusive, are they?
Sorry?
You can still be an array of strings that allows regular expressions if you wanted to.
Yeah. I guess the point is like I didn't include like or any language about regular expressions.
yeah, as for the regular expressions, does that mean that we need to load the whole content and then apply the regular expression to find about the paths? Or just correct me if I'm wrong. Or you can, without that, you can just maybe like in future, you can just, point to the and find exactly like what you need. With the regular expression, you have to apply it. So that's kind of.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to leave that as a potential future optimization, but not include it in the first version because it feels like could be some complexity there. And
it really depends what kind of regular expressions we want to support. So yeah, but it's a great idea actually. It had.
Okay. Yeah, so I think I agree with Spencer that it's probably better to add it later and as an additional optimization. Cool. Any other thoughts on this? Otherwise, we can. Oh, actually, one more thing. So I added here on future work. So basically, this allows us to like, if we have the document ID and we have the paths, then we can like load multiple documents. One thing that this doesn't solve is if, well, I know the DID of a user and I want to load it's like I used to know the DID and I want to load the IDX and all of that stuff. Right now, you have to kind of resolve the DID, look in the DID document, see if there's like an IDX service, and then you get the document ID, and then you can load all things. And if you have like, if you want to go from like a blockchain address, you would need to like load the CAC10 link documents, get the DID, and then resolve the DID, and then get the IDX document, and then load the thing you need. So that's something that I kind of wanted to solve with this. But it kind of introduces complexities because it's like, we need to like handle how to kind of resolve the IDs, and we need to like be able to do that kind of in protocol. And like, I don't like, so the one thing that's simple is like, oh, I want to resolve a CAC10 link. Like we could use like, the way you do that is like locally you create the Genesis record and you get the document ID, and then you can resolve that, but then you get back the content is used the DID. So you would need to plug that into the DID resolver. So I think it's possible to do that with basically, if we have, instead of doc here, we had like a I don't know, did resolver type, I don't know, some other type of property here that allows us to do kind of resolve a DID and then go through IDX. But I couldn't, like, I think right now that introduces like too much complexity. And I think it's probably a good idea to get this first iteration of this going. And basically, this still optimizes how many requests we need to make. But the kind of goal with this is that we can actually just make one request that goes from like a blockchain address to your basic profile or to the content that you want.
For each DID provider that we would want to be compatible with would require like having a client library for that DID provider to like load the DID docs, right? Like in say, Ceramic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's possible. One thing I think me and Paul discussed also is all the IDs are not going to be like supporting adding the IDX property to the document, especially if you're just using like a did key. If you're using a did key, then you can't actually update the document. So what we talked about doing there is like creating a tile that doesn't have any. So if we create a tile without content, we can actually create the tile Genesis record without signing it. And that would allow us to like create a tile that has like a tag that says like IDX link or something, and then the owner be the ID, and then you could like update that document to point to your IDX document. So this would act as like a link from the DID to the IDX document. And then you could do something like create that. If you know the DID, you could just generate that document. So that's like another approach instead of like having the IDX live in as like a service in the document.
One question about caching. Should the just Ceramic cache just the original document or the paths as well, other documents as well? Should this keep cache or the internal cache?
You mean when you load this?
Yeah.
Oh, I think you should probably maintain the cache of all the documents that you create, right?
Yeah.
I mean, unless there's like a node that returns like a document ID that's not actually in the path, then like obviously you would want to like garbage collect that.
Cool. Yeah, maybe it's cool to cache by the ID of the query to group them. Like if we want to, so maybe in the future, just to if it's correlation with the doc and paths and type, so to group like cache entries by the this ID in the query, so we can just get a response more quick.
Yeah, interesting.
That would prevent sharing the cache between different queries that access the same set of documents, though, right?
No, this is just the optimization. So you will have the underlying cache, but this will be the pointer that just groups other cache entries.
Okay. Makes sense.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, there's like a second layer cache on top of the main one.
Yep.
Okay. Any last thoughts on this?
Last thought I had was about the name load documents. So I guess like my assumption would be that I could load multiple documents, but really I can only load multiple documents that are linked to one. I wonder if like this, if like that is something else that we want to do. And like, if so, then maybe this name could be changed to be like a little bit more specific to what it's actually doing.
So like maybe like load linked documents.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I wanted to ask the similar one. So maybe we can just reuse the same method that we already have. It's a load document, but paths can be optional, right?
Right, but then the response, I guess this might be fine. But right now the response of load document is like just the doc type, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So then we would change that to be the.
Yeah, we can use it, or we can just change it to be record with. We'll change it to be the same. But yeah,
because we would always have this response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's simpler still to have a single document return the doc type directly, because this way you don't need to cast the doc ID every time to just look at the single record you get back.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Having one thing under the hood that they both share that works in the same way, but like for convenience for the developer, you probably want like a for the basic case, an easy way to get at just the one document.
Okay, so I'll change the name of this to load linked documents. Any other final thoughts? All right. I think that's all I wanted to share. We still have like 4 minutes. Spencer, do you want to give an update?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the things that are going to be relevant to other developers that would care, we have got a couple of backwards breaking API changes coming down the pipe. We've renamed, let's see, a few that have already landed. We've renamed the account link doc type to Cape 10 link. We've renamed the head record to the tip record for the newest entry on the top of the document log. We've renamed a bunch of the packages in the JS Ceramic repo. Renamed the data field in the Cape 10 link record type to content, although I'm not sure if any that would actually matter to any developers. I think that's under the hood. And a few other things are coming down the pipe in terms of requiring when you add a schema to a doc, we're going to make it so that you have to specify a particular version of the schema. So it's tied to a particular moment in time, so that if the schema changes, your doc doesn't suddenly go out of conformance with the schema out from under you, because it's pinned to a specific version. A few other backwards breaking changes will be landing in the next release. Removing the unnecessary doc type field to the Genesis record, including the chain ID in the Genesis header. I think those are the main ones.
Cool. And I guess you have a story for the PubSub update, right?
Yeah. To use the response message type instead of the request message type or whatever, or the update message type. Yeah.
Right. So maybe it makes sense for that story for you to actually implement this new kind of message types that is specified in the CAP.
Sure. That's a bigger bucket of work.
No, I know. I don't mean like implementing the full kind of system. Just like use the new formats for the messages. So you wouldn't like have to deal with the paths and stuff like that. Just like changing the format of the messages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can probably do that. Yeah, it is a small scope increase for sprint planning purposes, but it does make sense not to do work that we're just going to turn around and throw away.
Cool. Paul, any update you have related to kind of core ceramic?
No, not much to ceramic. Just IDX that has been updated to the latest version of it, so it should be compatible with it now. Yeah, that's it.
Nice. Hey Christian, do you have anything to share with us?
Well, I'm much less technical at this point in time than all of you guys. My programming days ended basically in let's call it 86. But I'm more like on the architecture side. So I'm part of a couple of standards organizations that heavily touch on identity. I'm part of the technical advisory board for an organization called Open Travel. And if you ever stayed at any hotel, that's the standard they are mostly using. It's been around for 20 years. And so there, what I'm hoping to do is to bring a couple of intelligent people like you guys together that have a good handle on the blockchain part of these solutions, albeit I think of this sector more as being graph dominated than blockchain dominated. I don't think it's actually long-term feasible to anchor anything to a blockchain, given where CCPA and other regulations are going, but that's probably a discussion for a different time. But the larger point here is I think it's super important to educate specifically legal professionals in that space. And well, let me, for courtesy purposes, even though you don't need to really see my ugly mug here, turn on the camera. The one thing we have been looking at these solutions for a long time, anything identity related. And so we have a large database we are investing in the space, right? And the one thing that is a continued theme is that legal professionals don't understand the technology, and technologists don't understand the implications of the implications into the law that technologies have. So I view most of these solutions as legal solutions, and so even like the starting point of identity, I think it's the wrong starting point. What I mean by that is oftentimes people assign this term digital identity to the space, which is actually something that's being addressed by a whole different field. Let's call it transhumanism, or the efforts to move consciousness to the digital realm. So most of the time, digital identity is kind of used as a euphemism for a collection of data that are being assembled for the purpose of profiling, so mostly profiles. So I don't want to like rant on, but my concern is mostly at the starting point and where I think I can be helpful based on the fact that I have a little bit of a software background, but also have a legal background, and I'm involved in the standards organization can help on the high level structure the right definitions for things, starting with identity itself and then pointing out what layers are needed. So we already have a couple of investments that are what I would call adjacent to the space. So we have biometrics investment and so forth, and that's a company that stores that information in a decentralized fashion. So I'm trying to build the bridges there, but I think where I can mostly be helpful, I'm trying to catch up on the documentation, but honestly, I'm a little bit lost right now. So if I can have some one-on-one time with someone where we can have a meeting of the minds that I can actually understand where you guys are, then I might be able to translate this to where our thesis is, what the stack is that we need, right? And what I mean by that is, a couple months ago, I briefed the Chief Privacy Officer of the US Senate, right, to tell him this is the state of the technologies, these are our concerns, this is what we'd like to invest in. And the largest concern is that I have at this point in time is I don't want to live in Orwell's 1984. And I think a lot of the movements that we see could easily lead to that. And obviously, well, in my opinion, I should say not obviously, but China is actively working to kind of exactly that scenario, right? And so what I can do is I can like bridge like the language gap, if you will, between technologists and legal professionals. One of my friends is state attorney here. He is in charge of creating the privacy law for police body cameras, cameras, right, that potentially can be used for facial recognition and so forth. So anyway, long story short, that's the reason why I'm on this call, right, to see how I can be helpful in that capacity, right? So, and it would be more on a higher level, but I would need someone from your end to help me basically translate the more nerdy parts that I'm no longer familiar with. The only thing that I ever properly learned was BASIC in 1984. So that doesn't really count, right?
Cool. I mean, yeah,
anyway, I don't want to take over the whole conversation.
No worries. Yeah, I mean, that sounds helpful. Are you in our Discord? We can follow up there, and if not, we can also follow up offline by email as well.
Probably am. I'm really bad with all those messaging tools, to be honest. But yeah, so I probably am on there someplace, but if not, I'll fix that. For sure.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, you can
Yeah.
reach out to us there, and then we can probably make some time if we have something more specific to share. Yeah.
Yeah, because I have a very high level and I think relatively good understanding based on the fact that we've looked at so many different solutions over the past 5 years, right? To where I think I might be able to classify like what are the levels that should be implemented. And by levels, what I mean by that is, so you got very, very simple information like your first name, your last name things, and then you got other information that are more specific, let's call it to government IDs. And so one example that most people probably won't know, and that's just something that I was heavily involved with in the standards thing, is like if you travel and you hand over your passport, there's a lot of different fields that people don't actually know of. If you have a similar name to a terrorist, there's exception codes for these that you can get from Homeland and so forth. And on that note, Homeland is also right now piloting a program actually with one of our companies for the visa waiver program specifically. And that's using also real-time facial data, right? And real IDs and stuff. So there's a lot of like different levels, I think, that are largely ignored at this point in time, which then at the end of the day either leads to a conflation of data where they shouldn't be conflated or not the right tool. I'm making one specific examples all the time.
No, I mean, all of that sounds helpful. Let's try to catch up after this offline because we're actually out of time.
Of course.
But yeah, thank you for joining.
Sure.
And thanks for everyone else for giving all of these updates.
And Christian, you can find the link to our Discord in the chat.
Okay.
And if you reach out there to any one of us, we're the people that are most active there.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to have like an hour with someone who can kind of catch me up, so that's more specific to what I understand thus far and what I should be understanding.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. Just let us know there, and we'll schedule something.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
All right, thanks all.
All right, bye everyone.